The hall was decorated with warm, yellowish lights, elegant tablecloths, and flower arrangements that seemed to have been specially chosen to create an atmosphere of celebration and relief. It was the kind of party people look forward to for years. Soft music in the background, trays of appetizers passed among the guests, laughter echoing, and pride in the air as everyone commented on the protagonist's husband's long years of dedication. He had worked for decades at that company, and that night marked the end of an era, the beginning of a new phase, or so everyone believed. His wife was there, smiling, greeting people, telling stories she'd repeated so many times they'd become automatic. But there was still an emotional gleam in her eyes. After all, that party wasn't just about him, it was about everything they'd been through together. Sleepless nights, tight budgets, difficult decisions, illnesses overcome, a marriage built not only on love, but on partnership. She believed that this new chapter would finally be a rest for both of them. Then, in the midst of this almost perfect scene, someone lightly tapped the microphone. The sound echoed through the hall, demanding everyone's attention. Her husband climbed onto the small makeshift stage, holding a glass of champagne. He seemed remarkably serene, as if he had rehearsed it for months. His wife smiled, proud. She felt part of that victory. And then he said the phrase that changed everything. "I'm finally free." The entire room laughed, except her. People interpreted it as a lighthearted joke, a typical prank from someone who had finally escaped the responsibilities of work. But his tone, something about the way he pronounced those words was different. There was no humor. There was no irony. There was relief, an almost somber relief. She felt a pang in her chest, as if her body had understood something her mind couldn't yet process. Her smile faded. Her eyes narrowed, searching his face for any sign that it was just an unfortunate comment. But he didn't look at her. He was only looking at the glass. And then came the even stranger moment. He stepped down from the stage, walking toward her. The hall parted, as if everyone knew that gesture was important. His wife straightened up, still smiling reflexively, a smile that was already trembling. When he stopped in front of her, he handed her an envelope, white, sealed, heavy. She frowned, confused. "What is that?" she asked, in a whisper that barely came out. He didn't answer. He simply placed the envelope in her hand as if delivering something inevitable, something planned, something final. The room watched. The hushed conversation ceased for a few seconds. A curious silence hung in the air. It was the kind of silence that carries expectation, but also the feeling that something was wrong, very wrong. She stared at the envelope like someone holding a bomb about to explode. Her hands began to sweat. Her breathing became heavy. It wasn't normal. It wasn't kind. It wasn't part of the celebration. And then the question that wouldn't go away took shape in his mind. Free from what? Free from whom? The party continued around her, with music, laughter, and toasts, but everything seemed distant, blurred, as if she had been pulled into a completely different emotional place. People only saw a wife holding a letter, but inside her something was screaming, something she didn't yet understand, but knew would change everything. She pressed the envelope against her chest for a few moments, unable to open it. It couldn't just be a thank you note, or a romantic memento. The weight of that object spoke louder than words. It was the symbol of a secret, of a breakup, of something he had hidden from her. The guests resumed their conversation, but many still cast curious glances. She sensed it. She felt that some knew something. She sensed that that phrase, "I'm finally free," it had been said to other people before it was said to her. The world began to spin slowly, as if time were being pulled by invisible hands. The envelope seemed to burn in her palm, and in that instant, she realized that the party wasn't about the end of his career. It was about the end of something much bigger. The story opens with her standing in the center of the party, surrounded by people, but completely alone. And the audience, just like her, is left with a latent question, burning for an answer. What exactly was he celebrating when he said he was finally free? While she still held the envelope, the hall remained noisy and festive, but inside, her mind began to wander to a distant place, the past. It was as if that sealed piece of paper had the power to pull her into her memories, forcing her to revisit everything she had built with him. As if, to understand the pain of the present, it was necessary to revisit every detail of the story they had shared. The first memory that came to mind was of their wedding. Not the day of the ceremony itself, but the period leading up to it. The plans they made together, the dreams they imagined, the way they both believed the future would be a blooming garden, even though life was only beginning to show its thorns. She remembered the sparkle in his eyes when he promised to be by her side throughout everything. And she believed him with a strength that few people possess these days. Years later, financial difficulties arose. He had lost his job, and she held everything together alone. She took on 2 jobs, sewed clothes for neighbors, did odd jobs around the house, anything to keep the routine going without making him feel diminished. She remembers how she hid her tiredness, how she smiled even when her eyes burned from sleepiness. He never asked if she was okay, but she didn't complain. "It's just a phase," she told herself. "He needs me." And so it went for years. She put his well-being above her own. When he had that anxiety attack because of work, she was the one who stayed up night after night, sitting by his side, holding his hand, telling him he wasn't alone. When he decided to go back to school, she was the one who saved money, cut expenses, and made silent sacrifices. When he wanted to try a new career, she took on all the household responsibilities. She was always there, always present, always steadfast. Meanwhile, he seemed to appreciate it from a distance. He wasn't a cruel man, but he also didn't truly see her effort. Often he forgot how much she sacrificed to keep them afloat. And over time, she got used to it. She thought it was normal to love more, give more, carry more. But in that room, holding that envelope, the question echoed inside like a muffled cry. How many times do we give everything and receive silence in return? The public feels this pain because it is a common pain, a pain that makes no sound but weighs heavily, a pain that grows slowly until it explodes in a moment like that. She also remembered lighter moments, their first small apartment, where they cooked together trying to learn recipes that never quite matched the ones in the book, the nights watching old movies, the plans scribbled on napkins, the short but meaningful trips. Yes, there was love, there was a dream, there was truth. But with time, her love continued to grow, and his seemed to stagnate. The husband began to prioritize his company, his friendships, his commitments, and she became a shadow in his routine, that silent presence that always solved everything. And, as much as it hurt, she accepted it. She accepted it because she believed that this was marriage. She accepted it because she thought that, when retirement came, they would finally have time for each other. Finally, they would be 2, and not one carrying the other. But now, remembering all of that, she realized something devastating. Perhaps she was the only one who saw marriage as a partnership. Perhaps he saw it as a burden. She remembered the times he would say, "I'll do it later. I'm busy. Not now." Always with a tiredness that seemed to be her fault, even though it never was. She remembered the birthdays he would forget, but she never let his pass. She recalled the health crises he had suffered, and how she gave up everything to take care of him, and how, when she needed him, he would simply say that it wasn't the best time. And now, as she held the envelope, the penny dropped cruelly. It wasn't just a letter. It was physical proof that the scales had never been balanced. The memories kept surfacing like scenes from a movie. She is giving up opportunities. She's rearranging her own life because of his schedule. She endured harsh comments because she believed he was just stressed. She always made choices thinking about us, while he always made choices thinking about himself. The audience connects with it because it's human. It's real. It's an everyday occurrence. It's painfully familiar. And yet, despite everything, she loved, and he still loved her. That's why that letter weighed so heavily on him. Therefore, that phrase, "I'm finally free," it hurt like a stab wound. Because she knew, deep down, if he felt free, it was because for him, marriage had become a prison. And there is no greater pain than discovering this too late. The past that no one saw now looked like a great mural of invisible sacrifices. And as she held the envelope, the audience felt with her the weight of a lifetime dedicated to someone who may never have realized or valued what they had. She takes a deep breath, trying to maintain her composure. But inside her, something begins to change. The past reveals who she was. The letter will show her who she needs to be from now on. After receiving the envelope from her husband, the wife tries to catch her breath. The hall remains brightly lit and noisy, but now everything seems out of sync, as if the world were functioning at a different pace and she had been left behind. It feels like everyone around her is having a party, except her. The music continues playing, the guests continue eating and smiling, but something is wrong. Something she only realizes now, with her heart racing and her hands still trembling. She looks around and notices something she hadn't seen before. At the table where his family is gathered, Glances are being exchanged. Quick, uncomfortable, almost guilty glances. One of the brothers glances in her direction and, when he realizes he's been seen, immediately looks away. The sister-in-law whispers something in her mother-in-law's ear, who frowns and sighs deeply, as if carrying a secret too heavy. The wife feels her stomach churn. The strangest thing is that nobody seems surprised by the envelope. Nobody seems to think he's out of place. On the contrary, it seems they were expecting it. How could she not have realized this before? Then she notices another detail. One of her nieces, who has always been affectionate with her, avoids eye contact. She pretends to be on her cell phone. She pretends to be busy. She pretends not to have seen anything. Her heart aches even more. If the whole family is acting strangely, what exactly is going on? She takes a deep breath and walks a few steps across the room. She needs air. She needs to think. She needs to try to understand. But as she walks, she notices that his co-workers, the ones who greeted her with laughter minutes before, are now whispering amongst themselves. Two of them, near the bar, glance quickly in her direction and then turn their backs, as if they didn't want to be caught talking. A third purses his lips, adjusts his blazer, and leaves through the side door as if he had fled an uncomfortable conversation. The wife feels a chill run down her spine. What is the secret that is being guarded so carefully, and everyone seems to know, except her? She tries to remember if, in the days before, there was any sign that something so big was about to happen, but everything seems the same, or seemed to. In retrospect, each gesture takes on a different meaning. Each conversation takes on a different tone. Each silence takes on a different color. Her mind fixates on a recent memory. Days before the party, she found her husband talking to two colleagues, and when she approached, the three immediately changed the subject. She thought it was strange, but didn't want to insist. Now, looking back, it seemed like an important piece of a puzzle that is only now beginning to reveal itself. In the center of the room, the husband is surrounded by people laughing and patting him on the back. He seems lighter than ever, the opposite of her. But even smiling, there's something about him that bothers me, the way he avoids looking in her direction. It's as if her presence is an uncomfortable reminder of what he did, or what he's about to reveal. She clutches the envelope tightly in her hands again. The physical presence of that object increases their anxiety. Her mind creates hypotheses. Is it a thank you letter? A declaration of love? An apology? An announcement of radical change? Or something worse? But the atmosphere in the room speaks for itself, even before she opens the envelope. It wasn't good at all. Near the cake table, two women are talking in hushed voices. One of them covers her mouth with her hand as she speaks. The other widens her eyes and stares at her wife with pity, genuine pity. And that look hurts more than any words. She feels the ground, shaking. Pity is a feeling that only exists when something has already been decided. Something has already happened. Something she doesn't know yet, but they do. The wife tries to approach a group of colleagues to overhear something, anything. But when she gets close, the conversations die down. People lower their heads, fidget with their glasses, pretend to be distracted. One woman tries to bring up a random topic, about the weather, the food, any pointless subject, just to deflect attention from the obvious. The feeling that overwhelms her is devastating. She's the only one in the dark. It's as if everyone in the room is playing a role, as if they were extras in a play whose protagonist hasn't even received the script yet. Meanwhile, the husband continues smiling, waving, chatting, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. He seems comfortable, relaxed, free, exactly as he said during the toast. Free, book. The word echoes in her mind like a hammer, getting stronger and stronger. It's becoming increasingly painful. She senses that something enormous is about to explode, something that will redefine everything: marriage, family, the future. Something that had been in the works for a long time. And the letter, that sealed envelope, seems to be the trigger for this silent explosion. The more she observes her surroundings, the clearer the feeling becomes that everyone there had been warned, except her. The room now seems smaller, suffocating, as if the walls were closing in. The lights seem brighter, the most distant sounds, the strangest people. The party, which was supposed to celebrate a history of achievements, now looks like a farewell ceremony, but not for a job. Yes, from a wedding. The audience follows everything, feeling the same anguish. Something is wrong, very wrong, and the revelation is too close. The envelope remained in her hand as if it had gained weight with each passing minute. When he placed that letter in her hands, the entire Room seemed to contract for a second, suspended in midair, but, as quickly as that moment came, it vanished. The husband turned, adjusted his jacket, and returned to the group of guests, laughing, chatting, receiving congratulations, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. This contrast tears you apart from the inside. She stood there, almost frozen, her heart racing and her hands trembling. He was light, free, relieved. She looks at his back as he talks to colleagues, hugs an old friend, greets his boss. His posture is that of someone who has lifted a great weight off his shoulders, and that hurts more than any words. Because if he's so at ease, it's because that envelope, that moment, isn't improvised. It's not an impulse. It's a decision. She looks away and then stares back at the envelope. The paper is plain, with nothing written on the outside. No for you, no drawn heart, no words of affection. Just a white, silent object that carries within it a sound she hasn't yet heard, but which she already feels echoing in anticipation. Her fingers began to wander along the edge of the seal. She could tear it open right there, at that very moment. She could end the torture of doubt. She could discover what he did, what he decided, what he planned. But fear paralyzes her, because up to that point, despite the discomfort, there is still a small protection. She doesn't know. Until you know for sure, you can still try to believe that the phrase, "I am finally free," was just a bad joke, that the envelope is a sentimental speech, that the discomfort you feel is just emotional exhaustion. But what if it isn't? And what if, once opened, there's no turning back? Her chest tightens. Her hand trembles so much that, for a moment, she fears dropping the envelope. She squeezes it tighter, as if trying to prevent the truth from escaping. It's contradictory. She wants answers, but she's afraid of them. Nearby, laughter erupts around a table. She hears someone talking about travel, another discussing retirement plans, another saying that now it's just about enjoying life. The words hit her like icy waves. Enjoying life. With whom? In what way? In what story? She looks around and realizes that, behind the music and the speeches, something much bigger happened, and nobody had the courage to say it directly. The audience, watching this scene, asks themselves the same question that begins to echo in her mind. How long has he been planning this? This question pierces you like a blade. What exactly did he plan? A surprise? A farewell? An escape? She goes back a few months in her memory. The days when he seemed distant. The conversations would cut short whenever she entered the room. The calls he answered were in another room. The hasty excuses, "It's a work thing, I'll explain later." Before, she interpreted all of this as stress. Now, these scenes are beginning to take on a different dimension, that of preparation, as if he were gradually building something away from her eyes, something that is only now reaching the surface, condensed in that simple, heavy envelope. She feels her throat closing up. He swallowed hard. Her eyes fill with tears, but she blinks hard. She doesn't want to cry there. Not in front of his family, not in front of people who might already know everything. Hold on to a corner of the table so you don't lose your balance. No one comes over to ask if she's okay. It's as if everyone is pretending not to notice. In a corner of the room, she sees a scene that hits her hard. Two of his colleagues are talking sideways, speaking quietly. One of them gestures discreetly in her direction, as if including her in a sentence that wasn't meant for her to hear. The other shakes his head, with a tense, almost guilty expression. Her heart responds with a silent sob. They know, but not me. She closes her eyes for a few seconds, taking a deep breath, trying to decide whether to open the envelope right there, in the middle of the party, or wait. Both options carry weight. If she opens it there, she risks collapsing in front of everyone, having her pain exposed as part of a spectacle that no one paid to see, but everyone would watch attentively. If she opens it later, in silence, she will be alone with the truth, and perhaps too late for any reaction. She feels that that piece of paper has become a turning point. There is a life before this letter, and there will be another after. Deep down, her mind tries to cling to small threads of hope. Perhaps it's a thank you letter. Perhaps he wrote something beautiful about our history. Perhaps it's an apology for having been distant. Maybe he's preparing a surprise that I still don't understand. But her body doesn't believe it. The body knows. His body read the tone of his voice when he said, "I'm finally free." It didn't sound like the relief of someone leaving their job. It sounded like the liberation of someone who breaks free from something. She notices the clock in the living room, mounted on the wall. The seconds seem to drag on. Each tick-tock is a push toward a decision she hasn't yet made. Open now? Wait? Does he face it? Run away? She squeezes the envelope again, so hard that she crumples it slightly. She feels the texture of the paper, feels the outline of what seems to be more than one sheet inside. This isn't a short note. It's a document. Document. The word itself is enough to send shivers down your spine. Documents are cold. Definitive. Legal. Organized. Planned. And again, the question returns, ever stronger, not only in her mind, but in the minds of those listening to the story from the outside. How long has he been planning this? Did he plan it in the silence of the night while she slept beside him? Did she plan it while she was cooking and he was answering emails on his cell phone? Did he plan it in meetings with the people who are now there, toasting with him, looking at her with a mixture of pity and discomfort? With her hand still trembling, she runs her thumb over the affixed stamp. If he wanted to, a simple gesture would suffice. A tear. A dry sound breaking the inner silence. But it doesn't. Not yet. She decides instinctively to step away for a bit. She heads towards the bathroom, pretending everything is fine. On the way, some people greet her, compliment the party, talk about the speech, make superficial comments. She responds with an automatic, almost mechanical smile, while inside, everything is falling apart. She stops at the bathroom door. Look at the envelope again. There, far from the music, far from the whispers, far from the stares, loneliness weighs in a different way. She could go in, lock herself in a booth, and read. But it's not enough. Not yet. Keep the envelope in your bag. It's their unconscious way of postponing the inevitable, of pushing the truth forward a few minutes, like someone trying to buy time before an impending storm. She looks at herself in the mirror for a moment. The reflection shows a well-groomed woman, with impeccable makeup, a beautiful dress, and her hair neatly styled. But behind the facade, there are cracks, subtle dark circles under the eyes, compressed lips, a lost look in his eyes. She knows something is about to break. She doesn't know when, she doesn't know how, but she feels it. And when she returns to the hall, with the envelope now hidden but still weighing on her mind, the feeling only intensifies. That party isn't a beginning. It's an end. A carefully planned ending by someone who, while saying we, was already orchestrating an I. And soon, the letter will put that in writing. When she returns to the hall, still with the envelope tucked away in her purse, but burning as if it were alive, she realizes that the atmosphere seems even stranger than before. Perhaps nothing has truly changed. Perhaps she is the one who now sees everything with different eyes. But the feeling is clear. Something has shifted, as if the party has gone off kilter. And it is at this moment that the inevitable need arises within her. She needs to find him. You need to look at him, even if only for 2 seconds, to try and grasp some truth that the letter hasn't yet revealed. Because sometimes, the eyes say what the mouth hides. She takes a deep breath, adjusts her dress, and begins walking around the hall looking for him. He walks past the decorated tables, the group of relatives, the bar, the circles of conversation, but nothing. He's not where he used to be, and that's very strange. He was always sociable, always the center of attention, always liked to talk more than listen. But today he is a shadow that moves too fast to be reached. She finally sees him across the room, near the dessert table, surrounded by 2 colleagues who seem engrossed in conversation. One of them laughs too loudly, which draws attention. Her husband, however, doesn't laugh. He only smiles in a restrained way, a polished, rehearsed, distant smile. And then comes the moment that takes it apart from the inside. He sees her, for a second, a single second, a second that lasts an eternity. His gaze meets hers but doesn't linger. He looks away immediately, quickly, abruptly, almost desperately, like someone caught doing something they shouldn't, like someone who doesn't want to face the consequences of their own choices. The wife feels her stomach drop. Looking away like that isn't shyness. It's not a distraction. It's an escape, and there's a reason for the escape. She gathers her courage and starts walking towards him. One step, other, and another one. Each step is an attempt to regain control, to tell herself that she deserves answers, that she has the right to understand what is happening. But the closer she gets, the further he seems to move away, as if instinctively avoiding confrontation. He turns his body, changes the direction of the conversation, approaches another table. He doesn't look at her, for even a second. It's impossible to ignore. He's avoiding her on purpose, and that hurts much worse than any sentence he could have said. She approaches within a few meters, about to call him by name when someone appears beside her, One of his colleagues, a middle-aged man, with a drink in his hand and a nervous, almost guilty smile. "So, you already know?" he asks. The phrase explodes in the air. It's not said in a gossipy tone. It's not said in a joking tone. It is said in a tone, a finding, as if it were obvious, as if she had already read the contents of the envelope, as if she were merely confirming the inevitable. She freezes. Eyes widen, breath catches, heart leaps painfully in the chest. Know what?" she asks, her voice broken, almost silent. The colleague realizes immediately that he has made a huge mistake. His eyes widen, and he brings his hand to his mouth as if trying to gather his words. Nothing. I thought that," he stammers, unsure how to get out of that situation. It's too late. The phrase had already pierced her like a knife. Her body understands even before her mind. There is something enormous, something much bigger than she imagined, something he told other people, but not her. The wife glances at her colleague for a few seconds, trying to decipher what he knows. But the man quickly looks away, pretends to straighten his jacket, takes a step back, and disappears among the guests. Escaping seems to be the standard behavior that night. She turns her gaze to her husband, and then he realizes that he saw her talking to her colleague. He noticed her. He saw the moment she almost found out everything. And it is at that moment that his gaze says what his mouth would never say. Not a direct look. He would never do that now. But the way his face pales, how his posture changes, how he takes a deep breath, how he anxiously claps his hands together, all of this reveals the most painful truth. He knows she's getting closer. He knows she's about to find out, and he's afraid of that. The silence between them, even though they are separated by meters, is deafening. A silence full of history, full of secrets, full of farewells that have not yet been spoken, but have already been felt. The wife remains where she is, looking at him, while the husband turns his face away once more, as if trying to hide behind his own guilt. The tension in the air grows like a storm about to burst through the roof. The guests continue chatting, laughing, and toasting, but there, between the two of them, lies a chasm that is widening ever wider. She no longer needs to open the envelope to know that the truth will hurt, but you need to open it to find out. How much? And why? His averted gaze, his colleague's comment, the whispers, the uncomfortable looks, everything is connecting. Everything is converging. Everything is about to explode. The audience feels it instantly. It's no longer just a feeling. That's a fact. There is a hidden truth, and it is getting closer and closer to being revealed. After her colleague's comment, "So, you already know?" something inside her finally broke. It wasn't just discomfort anymore. It wasn't just intuition. It wasn't just a bad feeling trying to warn her of something. Now it was certainty. There was a truth circulating among the people at that party, except in the hands of the one person who should have received it in the first place. And ironically, she literally had that truth in her purse. Stored. Lettuce. Throbbing. She feels the weight of her bag on her shoulder as if she were carrying a brick. The music seems louder, the lights more aggressive, the voices more bothersome. She knows she can't postpone it any longer. She can't pretend it's just a party anymore. She can't smile at those who avoid her gaze anymore. She needs to open the letter. With firm steps on the outside and completely broken on the inside, she crosses the hall. She doesn't call anyone, doesn't explain herself, doesn't justify herself. She goes straight for the exit, feeling her heart pounding in her neck, her hands sweating and her legs growing heavy, as if her body were trying to hold her back, pleading, "Don't find out. Not now. Not like this." But it's long past time. She pushes open the door and steps out onto the hall's outdoor area. Outside, the night is much quieter. Just a few parked cars, the muffled sound of the party coming from inside, and a light breeze that makes her dress sway. She takes a deep breath, as if emerging to the surface after being trapped underwater for a long time. She leans against the side of a car, takes her bag off her shoulder with trembling hands, and after standing still for a few seconds, finally picks up the envelope. Look at him as if you were facing a sentence. For a few moments, he considers not opening it. Perhaps, if it doesn't open, life can still continue a little longer in the almost, in the maybe, in the it'll be nothing. But that's not living. It's about hiding. With a slow movement, she slides her finger under the flap of the envelope. The paper makes a dry sound as it tears. It's a small sound, but inside her it echoes like a bang. She feels her heart racing. Pull the leaves out from inside. It's not just one page. There are several. Typed, formal, without any scribbles, without any little hearts, without any affectionate handwritten phrases. It's not a love letter. It's not a memory. It's not a thank you. It's a document. She begins to read. In the first few seconds, the words don't make sense. They're just there, organized, cold, technical. But as your eyes move forward, understanding comes like a punch to the gut. Her world is collapsing, line by line. He didn't write to say, thank you. He wrote to say, it's over. That envelope, delivered in public, in front of family, friends, and colleagues, was not an emotional gesture. It was a calculated act. In practice, it was the official beginning of a separation. Inside were phrases like, after years of marriage, I've come to the conclusion, I need to prioritize my personal freedom. I've already taken legal action. You will receive the formal terms in the coming days. She feels the ground disappearing beneath her feet. The letters begin to get jumbled. The sentences seem to revolve around her. He wasn't just asking for a divorce. He was informing us that this had already been in progress for some time. He had spoken with a lawyer. I had moved accounts. He had made decisions about the house, the savings, the retirement, without consulting her, without even preparing her emotionally. That party, which in her mind was a celebration of the beginning of a new phase for the two of them, in his mind was a rite of passage to his new life. Alone. I'm finally free. I am finally free. The sentence now made sense in a cruel way. He wasn't quitting his job. He was saying goodbye to her. She feels a wave of heat rise through her body, followed by an intense chill. Her stomach churns, her mouth goes dry, her eyes burn. Her hands begin to tremble so much that the leaves almost slip from her fingers. She needs to lean more firmly against the car to avoid falling. My heart is racing. The heartbeats are so strong that she can hear them in her own ear. A buzzing sound begins to fill his head, mingling with the distant sound of the party music inside. She continues reading, even though she has no strength left. Between the lines, you'll find something even more devastating. He reveals that he already had a plan to move. He mentions the possibility of living somewhere else. He comments that he has felt trapped for a long time, and that he needs to live his own life while there is still time. And as if that weren't enough, there's a paragraph that subtly but clearly suggests the existence of someone. Not by name, not in detail, but with phrases like, someone helped me realize that I couldn't continue living like this. Her chest tightens. It's hard to even breathe. She feels as if the air has been sucked out of the world. Each sentence in the letter is a cruel confirmation. While she carried the burden of marriage, he planned his escape. While she believed retirement would be a time of rest for two, he orchestrated his own freedom. Alone. The ground opens up. My legs give out. My heart is racing. Her legs feel weak and she slowly slides down until she's completely against the car, almost, sitting on the ground. She presses the papers against her chest, then pulls them away to read them again, in the absurd hope that she misunderstood. But you didn't misunderstand. It's all there, cold, signed, decided. On the last page, there's a handwritten passage, perhaps the only trace of something emotional, but even so, it's laden with cowardice. I hope that one day you will understand me. I deserve to be happy. You are strong. You will know how to move forward. She reads it with a mixture of anger and disbelief. I deserve to be happy. As if throughout all those years, her happiness had been disposable. As if her strength justified him abandoning her. As if her ability to endure pain was permission for him to inflict it. The tears finally flow. Not the silent, elegant tears of romantic movies, but heavy tears that burn, that flow uncontrollably, soaking the paper, blurring some letters. She feels a deep sense of humiliation, not only because of the decision itself, but also because of the way it was done. He didn't have the courage to sit down in front of her and say, I want to leave the marriage. He didn't have the courage to have an honest, tough, face-to-face conversation. He preferred to plan a party, gather everyone together, toast his own freedom, and, as if handing out any old invitation, place in her hands a document that dissolved not only the marriage, but also her dignity at that moment. The emotional blow isn't just the content of the letter. It's the way it was done. That's the scenario. It's the timing. It's the certainty that this wasn't an impulse. It was planned. The question on everyone's mind, how long has he been planning this, is now taking concrete form. Without needing to specify dates, the letter makes it clear. Some time ago. It's been a long time. And she was the last to know. There, outside the party, with burning eyes, a shattered heart, and hands clutching that pile of cold words, she realizes one of life's hardest truths. Sometimes the hardest blow isn't the one that ends something. This shows that it had already ended a long time ago. You just didn't know it. She closes her eyes. He is breathing with difficulty. And for the first time that night, she thinks of a question she hasn't yet dared to ask. If he's free now, what's left for me? The letter, silent, does not reply, but the pain inside her screams. When she finally lowers the pages of the letter, still dazed and breathing unevenly, something slides along the side of the pages and falls to the floor. A thicker, stiffer piece of paper, a smaller envelope inside the larger one. That dry, almost imperceptible sound sends a new shiver down her spine, as if the initial letter were only the first blow, and what just fell was the continuation, perhaps even worse. She blinks, trying to focus, but her vision is blurred by tears. For a moment, she considers leaving that other document where it is. Perhaps she has suffered enough for one night. Perhaps she can't handle anything more. But something inside her, something mixed between despair and instinct, makes her reach out her hand. When he touches the inner envelope, he realizes it's not sealed. It's just folded, carefully, as if it had been kept there on purpose, waiting for the exact moment to be discovered. The paper is rougher, stiffer, with a different smell, the smell of a notary's office, of bureaucracy, of decisions made coldly. She opens it, and what you find is not a letter, it's a contract, a signed document, dated, notarized by the signature. She feels her stomach churn. It's not just a request for emotional separation. It's a separation, legal. It's already advanced, already structured, already prepared. He wasn't asking to end the marriage. He was communicating. He had already moved months before. Her hands begin to tremble again, now with indignation. She brings the document closer to her face, trying to find a mistake, trying to find any clue that this isn't real, but it is. Every line confirms it. Every signature seals it. Every stamp screams a devastating truth. He had planned everything, in silence, meticulously, cold, methodical. The dates show transactions dating back 4, 5, 6 months. While she believed he was just going through a difficult phase, he was opening separate accounts, dividing assets, reorganizing property, calculating values. The man who swore to partnership was setting up a chessboard all by himself and using her as a piece without her even knowing she was in the game. The document provides details, transfers, clauses, items already discussed with lawyers, formalized meetings. He had attended at least 3 legal meetings, all at times when he said he was taking care of work matters. She closes her eyes, disgusted. How many times had she adjusted his tie before these meetings? How many times have you asked, "Are you okay?" And he replied, "Yes, just tired." How many times did she make coffee for him to rush out, believing it was just another tough day at work? The lump in her throat tightened until she was almost choking. She turns the page and sees another signature, his, signed calmly, legibly, steadily. The signature of someone who had no doubts about anything. The signature of someone who had already made the decision and was just waiting for the right moment to reveal it. Inside, there's a draft version with handwritten notes, cut phrases, altered options, marginal calculations. This shows 2 things. He didn't do it at the last minute. He thought of every detail. She feels her heart breaking in another direction now, the direction of the deepest humiliation. Because when you look at those notes, you realize it's not just about a divorce. It's a life repositioning. It's a rearrangement of the future. It's a plan that involves money, house, assets, intellectual property, retirement savings, everything they've built together. And the cruelest part, he did it without talking to her. He did this while sleeping next to her. He did this while eating the food she had prepared. He did this while she believed she was building a future with him. The contrast explodes within her. While she dreamed of trips and quiet dinners now that retirement was approaching, he dreamed of freedom, but freedom without her. And then, an even more devastating question invades your mind. If he planned this months ago, who else knew? The answer shoots through her body in a shiver. His family knew. Their gazes were averted, the muffled conversations, the mother-in-law's uncomfortable smile, the brother who pretended to be using his cell phone when she stared at him, and not just the family. His coworkers knew as well. Of course they knew. They participated in meetings, listened to comments, and witnessed changes. The colleague who asked, "So, do you already know?" wasn't trying to gossip. He really thought she had already received the document. She was the last piece of a secret that had been kept for months. She swallows hard, struggling, as her mind tries to process the depth of it all. Everyone knew, everyone was prepared, everyone had time to digest it, except for her. She was left out of her own story. And this is the second layer of betrayal, just as devastating as the first. It wasn't just that he was separating from her. That's because he was separating from her, together with other people, creating a network of silence to keep her in the dark. The thing is, he made their marriage a public secret, and her truth a private secret. She looks at the document again and feels something different now. The pain continues, strong, throbbing, almost physical. But behind the pain, an unsettling shadow begins to emerge. Anger. Not an explosive, noisy rage, but a deep, silent anger. The kind of anger that appears when someone finally realizes they've been deceived, manipulated, and underestimated. She clutches the document tightly in her hands, takes several deep breaths, trying to regain clarity. Tears are still streaming down her face, but now there's something new in her eyes. A spark. Because now she knows everything. Now she saw the plan. Now she understood the extent of the lie. Now she understands that it wasn't just a decision. It was an operation. And when a person is betrayed in this way, the initial shock eventually gives way to another force. The force of someone who has nothing left to lose. She carefully folds the document, puts it in her bag along with the letter, and remains there for a few seconds, breathing in the cold night air, recovering pieces of herself that the impact had almost torn away. And, as she does this, a certainty forms within her, clearer than ever. If he thought he was in control, it was because he underestimated the wrong person. She remains outside the hall for a few minutes, her purse close to her body, as if embracing not only her belongings, but the pieces of her own heart. The letter and the document still vibrate in her memory as if she were reading everything aloud, repeatedly. The humiliation is still fresh, the pain is still raw, the feeling of betrayal is still almost unbearable. But there, in the darkness, far from the bright lights of the party, something begins to change. It's subtle, almost imperceptible. It's not a one-time change. It's not an instant cinematic twist. It's a slow awakening. She wipes away her tears with the back of her hand, takes a deep breath, 1, 2, 3 times. She feels a pain in her chest, but even so she continues breathing, as if she were relearning something she had always done without thinking, to exist. Inside, the sounds of the party continue. People laugh, glasses clink, someone is probably giving a speech. The music tries to fill any void, but for her, that sound is now just distant noise. That party no longer belongs to her. She finally understands a hard truth. In that room, everyone, in some way, was ready for that moment, except her. Everyone had time. It had an impact. And that's precisely why, for the first time that night, she decides to make a decision that is solely hers, without consulting anyone, without waiting for someone to explain, without asking permission to feel what she feels. She straightens her spine, takes another deep breath, and with firm steps, begins walking toward the parking lot. She doesn't go back inside. She doesn't look for someone to justify herself to. She doesn't ask her husband to talk things over. She doesn't give anyone the right to validate her pain. She's just going to leave. There is no scandal, no shouting, no broken glass. Her revenge, at this initial stage, is silence. It's a refusal. Refusal to participate in a theater where she was placed as an extra in her own life. Each step she takes toward the car is heavy with emotion, but light with determination. It's as if with each step she's stepping out of a role she's played for years, the role of the wife who endures everything, understands everything, accepts everything, forgives everything, and beginning to discover a version of herself who doesn't quite know who she is yet, but who, for the first time, is seeing herself as the protagonist. When she finally reaches the car, she leans against the door and takes one more breath. The night air is cold, but it brings a strange clarity. She feels like crying again, like collapsing right there, but something inside her prevents her from completely destroying herself. She opens the door, goes inside, and closes it carefully. The muffled sound of the party almost completely fades away. Now it's just her, the silence, and the soft sound of her own breathing. Her hands still tremble as she places her purse on the passenger seat. She glances toward the party venue in the rearview mirror. She sees the lights, some silhouettes, the reflection of a party that continues as if nothing had happened, as if the world could go on as normal after, tearing a life to pieces with a document. She feels the pain rising once more, but now, along with it, comes something different. A sentence is born, first as a timid thought, Then as something clear, whole, almost audible. If he's free, then I can be too. She repeats it mentally, again and again. If he is free, then I can be too. This phrase acts as a counterattack within it. For years, she had associated freedom with abandonment, loneliness, the failure of everything she had built. But at that precise moment, she begins to see a different glimmer of hope. If he chose his freedom without considering her, why should she remain attached to someone who had already left inside a long time ago? She didn't yet know what it meant to be free. I didn't know if it meant moving house, moving city, changing my life, or changing my routine. But he knew that, for the first time, the word freedom did not belong only to him. She could also claim that word. The hurt is still there, throbbing. The pain still cuts, deep. But the resentment, little by little, begins to transform into fuel. A strange fuel, made of indignation, weariness, and self-esteem awakening after years of slumber. She grips the steering wheel, but doesn't start the car yet. She needs a few seconds to gather her thoughts. Until that day, her plans had always revolved around us. We are going to travel. We're going to rest. We're going to enjoy retirement. We're going to have some time just for ourselves. There is no longer an us. There is a he who decided to go alone, and there is a she who, despite being broken, is still whole enough to start over. At first, this thought seems impossible. Starting over after so many years, learning to live without it, learning to be me after so long being us. But it is there, in that car seat, with her face still wet with tears and her heart in tatters, that the first seed is born. She doesn't need to remain trapped in a story that the other person decided to abandon. Transformation doesn't happen with a sudden smile, nor with a burst of cinematic courage. It happens in an intimate, silent, almost invisible decision that only the heart itself knows how to recognize. She will no longer be a spectator to her own pain. She will act. For the first time, she starts asking different questions. No more. Why did he do this to me? Yes. What am I going to do with myself from here on out? No more. What will become of us? But who can I be? Now, she knows the journey will be painful. You know that the next few weeks will be full of disruptions, memories, paperwork, discussions, and explanations. You know you're going to cry many more times. She knows she'll doubt herself. She'll oscillate between wanting to leave and wanting to understand, between feeling anger and feeling longing. But there, alone inside the car, she makes a small but powerful promise. She won't let herself be destroyed by someone who has already decided to move on without looking back. She rests her head on the seat, closes her eyes for a few seconds, and lets the phrase echo once more. If he's free, then I can be too. But unlike him, the freedom she begins to build is not based on escape, selfishness, or silent betrayal. It is a freedom built on self-respect, looking in the mirror and recognizing that, before being a wife, she is a person who feels, who suffers, who loves, but who can also get back up. When he finally starts the car, his hands are still trembling, no longer from pure despair, but from shock mixed with decision. She puts the car in gear, takes a deep breath, and starts to pull out of the parking lot. Don't look back. Don't look for his face among the illuminated windows. She doesn't expect him to chase after her, to bang on the window, to stop her from leaving. If he wanted to be free, now he will also have to deal with what it means to lose someone who stood by his side through everything. And she will discover, for the first time, what it's like to be by her own side. The audience feels this shift. It's not a noisy comeback, but it's a powerful one. The hurt begins to transform into courage. The pain begins to transform into movement. The woman who entered that party as a supporting character leaves it taking her first steps as the protagonist of a new story. She still doesn't know how this story continues, but one thing, deep down, is already decided. She will no longer accept a life where only others have the right to be free. From there, the transformation truly begins. The night passes far too slowly. When she finally arrives home after leaving the party, she can't sleep. The silence of the house, which had always been a refuge, now feels like a scream. Every corner, every object, every photograph on the wall throbs like a cruel reminder of what she lost, or rather, what she discovered she never fully had. She spends the entire night sitting on the edge of the bed, with the lights off, just listening to the clock ticking away the hours as if counting the minutes until her life officially becomes something else. The letter and the document are on the table, and she still hasn't had the courage to touch them again. But she doesn't need to. The words remain etched in her mind as if engraved on her heart. As the sun timidly begins to peek through the window, she realizes that, however much she might want to, she cannot avoid the inevitable. She will have to face the next day. She will have to face life as a woman who has just left a retirement party, without a husband, without answers, without solid ground. She gets up slowly, as if her whole body weighed her down. She washes her face, ties her hair back, puts on simple clothes. Everything seems automatic, mechanical, as if she were on autopilot. But her mind is far from silent. On the contrary, it's a storm. And it is precisely when the day begins to take shape that something strange happens. The memories are starting to come together, like pieces of a puzzle that have been jumbled for months, and that now, with the revelation, finally fit together. She sits at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee in her hands, and then the first memory comes to her. That afternoon, months ago, when he came home saying he was going to work late, she offered to bring him dinner at the office, something she always did when he was going through tough times. He refused too quickly. He seemed almost nervous. He said he didn't need it, that nobody would stay there late. But that night, when she called the company to ask if he was still there, he wasn't there. And she became convinced that she must be on the right track. Now she knows. He wasn't coming home from work. He was returning from some meeting, perhaps with his lawyer, perhaps with someone else, perhaps with whoever helped him believe he was imprisoned. The second memory hurts even more. 3 months earlier, he had changed the password for their joint bank account. He said it was for security reasons. She believed him. He was always good at making excuses. Never aggressive, never rude, always convincing, like someone who speaks the truth. But now she sees the whole scene with different eyes. It wasn't about security. It was about distance. It was about separation. It was about preparing the ground for what was written in that cold document. And then another memory comes, one she tried to ignore for weeks. He started receiving calls late at night. He would answer too quickly. He would get up to talk in another room. He would say it was something from the company, a technical problem, an urgent call. She asked once if everything was all right. He replied, "Everything is under control." But his voice, today she understands that she wasn't controlling a problem. I was controlling a lie. The coffee grows cold in her hands as the memories continue to rearrange themselves one by one. She remembers her husband's expression when she suggested they travel after retirement. He gave a crooked, strange, hesitant smile, the same smile he gave when he needed to hide something. He said that it could be, and that they would see calmly. Take it easy. She believed it meant planning. Now she knows that meant postponement. He didn't want to make commitments he didn't intend to keep. She recalls how he started sleeping in the living room a few times, blaming it on the heat, a cold, or his back. He always had a no excuse. Now she understands. He was trying to distance himself emotionally before distancing himself physically, and each memory brings a new punch. Remember when he stumbled upon a strange folder on his computer? Something named Documents 2024. When he opened it, he only saw a few PDFs. Nothing special. But there was a password-protected subfolder. He got nervous when he realized she had accessed it. He said it was retirement material, that it was nothing. She believed it. Of course he believed it. Who would doubt their own husband after so many years? Now she knows. The folder was part of the plan. The documents were there, hidden under the pretense of retirement, which for her meant rest. For him, it meant escape. She recalls the weeks when he seemed more distant, more worried, more tense. She kept asking, "Is something happening?" He would reply, "No, just tiredness." And she, tired as well, but always strong, did not insist. Now you understand. He wasn't tired. He was, planning his escape. And the worst blow comes when she remembers something small, almost insignificant, but which now shines with brutal clarity. One day, while shopping at the supermarket, she picked up his cell phone to look at the list he had sent. When she unlocked it, a notification quickly appeared on the screen. Reminder, meeting, Wednesday, 10 a.m., law office. She asked what it was. He replied immediately, "That's a matter for the company's legal department. It's not my responsibility." She believed it, because there was never a reason not to believe. Now she understands that the meeting wasn't about the company. It was his. It was about the end of the marriage. A meeting scheduled, planned, and organized. All this while she went about her routine, unaware that life was being redesigned without her involvement. Tears begin to well up again as the pieces fall into place like a cruel mosaic. strange behavior, the conversations that were avoided, the secret meetings, the false excuses. Their gazes were averted. Sleepless nights. Everything makes sense now. A painful, brutal, heartbreaking feeling. She realizes that she wasn't caught off guard simply because he decided to be cruel. She was caught off guard because she trusted him, because he believed, because he loved, because she envisioned a future alongside someone who had already removed her name from the plan. The pain of understanding this is far deeper than the pain of the letter, because the letter is the result. But all those memories, they are the construction, the process, the bricks he placed one by one to prepare the way out. She closes her eyes for a few seconds, feeling her mind spin. Everything falls into place now, and that's precisely why it hurts so much more. Because the truth didn't just come out on paper. The truth came back to me, and memory doesn't lie. She opens her eyes, looks out the window, takes a deep breath and thinks, he had been leaving for months. I just didn't see it. But now she can see. Now she knows. And however immense the pain may be, knowing is the first step towards recovering yourself. The entire morning passed amidst painful memories, heavy silence, and an almost constant tightness in her chest. But, as the clock approached noon, something inside her shifted. It wasn't joy, it wasn't relief, not yet, but it was a different feeling, a need to react. She finally realizes that she can't face all of that alone. He spent months preparing, so she also needs to prepare now. And that's where the first step of the counterattack begins. After hours of pacing around the house, unsure where to put her hands, she opens an office drawer and takes out the business card of a lawyer a family friend had recommended years ago when they had a problem with a house contract. At the time, she kept that card for any emergency. Now she understands that fate made her save that for this exact moment. She takes a deep breath, picks up the phone and dials the number. Her voice comes out shaky, but firm enough to ask for help, to schedule a meeting, to say, for the first time out loud, I need to understand a separation letter. The lawyer asks her to go that afternoon. She drives to the office with cold hands on the steering wheel, feeling her heart heavy, but not broken like the night before. Now, there is a thread of strength there, almost invisible, but real. When she arrives at the office, the lawyer, an experienced man with an attentive gaze and a calm expression, receives her respectfully. She hands over the letter and the document, explaining everything between pauses, restrained tears, and a tremor that arises each time she remembers the phrase, I'm finally free. He reads silently, turn the page with technical care, with a trained eye, take quick notes. She sighs at some points, frowns at others. She realizes that something is happening there, something she may not have noticed in her first readings, when shock still dominated everything. After a few minutes that felt like hours, he places the paper on the table, interlaces his hands, and says, Look, he tried to be clever, but he wasn't clever enough. Her heart races. She leans forward, with fear and hope at the same time. Like this? And then comes the beginning of the plot twist, the moment that no one, least of all the husband, expected. The lawyer begins to explain that, although the document appears well-structured, full of clauses, legal, terms, and stamps, it has several loopholes, significant gaps, loopholes that, if she wanted, could completely turn the game around. This document was made to be a definitive opinion, the lawyer says, but in reality, he protected himself more than he needed to, and ended up protecting you too. Her eyes widen. He continues explaining, point by point. First, he says something that changes everything. The separation could only be made official after a formal process that he didn't fully initiate. In other words, the letter was not the end. It was merely an attempt to intimidate her emotionally. He wanted you to believe that everything was resolved, the lawyer explains. But there lies the first flaw. Nothing here is valid without your knowledge and signature. She feels her heart lighten a little. The lawyer points out another loophole. In several sections of the document, the husband unilaterally assumed financial responsibilities, something that, in a separation process, could be reversed in her favor. He thought he was being clever, the professional comments, but in trying to come out on top, he ended up leaving traces that show he acted alone, and that weighs heavily against him in court. She feels a tightness in her throat, but now it's not from pain. It's a surprise, and something more, hope. Then the lawyer picks up one of the pages and says, this part is the worst for him. He claims he's already made financial transactions without his authorization. That's illegal. That can be contested. That gives you an advantage. She brings her hand to her face in disbelief. He did this even thinking he was safe? Exactly, the lawyer replied. He set everything up thinking you'd just go along with it. He underestimated you. And underestimating someone always comes at a high price. She swallows hard, remembering her husband's words at the party. From the coldness, from the speech, from the glances, from relieved happiness. And then, she understands. He believed he had won. He believed he had obtained his freedom without consequences. He believed she would accept it silently, devastated, without revising anything, without fighting for anything. But he was wrong. Very wrong. The lawyer continues. You have more rights than you realize, including over his retirement, including over his assets, his house, everything that has been accumulated over these years. She looks at her own hands, which were trembling before, now slowly, steadying. It's like, for the first time since the party, I can really breathe. But the lawyer didn't finish. And there's more. He mentioned a third person in this passage. He points to the phrase about someone who helped him see things clearly. This opens the door for an investigation into infidelity, and if it's proven, his legal situation gets much worse. She feels the air entering deep into her lungs, as if she were waking up. So, I'm not helpless? She asks, her voice low, still, incredulous. Absolutely not, the lawyer replied firmly. On the contrary, if you want, you can get out of this situation much better than he imagines. The silence in the office is profound, but it's not a silence born of fear. It is a silence of understanding, of rebirth. The lawyer hands over a copy of the loopholes he's noted and says, he thought he was free, but you are too, and he's much stronger than he thinks. She takes a deep breath, feels the tears welling up, but this time, tears of, strength, not defeat. She gathers the documents, puts them in her bag, and stands up in a posture she hasn't had since the previous day. As she leaves the office, something inside her finally repositions itself. An internal axis aligns itself. A decision is taking shape. A future is beginning to be rewritten. She will not simply be an abandoned woman. You will not be the victim of a letter. He will not be the target of a silent plot. She will be the counterattack herself. She will be the unexpected twist in the story. And the audience feels the force of this transformation. It's the exact moment when we realize that the character will not only rise again, but will surprise those who tried to bring her down. The way home after the meeting with the lawyer feels different. The streets are the same, the sidewalks are the same, the buildings have the same illuminated windows, but something about it has changed. It's not a sudden change, the kind that instantly becomes a story of overcoming adversity. It's something more internal, deeper, something that still hurts, but now shines, timidly, deep down, like an ember about to turn into a fire. She is not happy. She is still hurt, wounded, exhausted, but it is no longer destroyed. And that, after everything she's been through in the last 24 hours, is already a victory. When he enters the house, he realizes how the silence now has a different weight. The previous night, there had been a silence of rupture, of mourning, of a shock. Now it is a silence of new beginnings. A silence that says, it's up to you to decide what to do from here on out. She closes the door behind her and slowly takes off her shoes, as if she were also shedding the emotional weight of that marriage. She goes to the living room, sits on the sofa, and takes a deep breath. The house is the same, but it feels different. For the first time, she notices the details. The crooked lampshade that I always had to straighten because he complained. The blanket she put on the sofa so he wouldn't get cold. His favorite cup, still in the drainer. Each object seems to look at her as if to say, and now, what are you going to do with what's left? She slowly gets up and starts walking around the house. She opens a drawer in the kitchen and sees the old recipes that he never wanted to try, but that she always wanted to cook. You open the living room cupboard and find books you bought, but never read because you didn't have time. She walks past the door to the guest room, where she keeps boxes containing things that belonged to her before the wedding. Photos, notes, mementos from a time when she had her own dreams that didn't depend on anyone else. She opens one of those boxes, and there she finds versions of herself that have been kept hidden for years, concealed by the weight of responsibilities she assumed alone. A photo from when she traveled with friends, a notebook filled with ideas for courses I wanted to take, a bucket list she wrote in her early 20s that, somehow, she never fulfilled. The pain is still there. But for the first time, pain doesn't take up everything. It shares space with something else. a silent desire to start over. She sits on the floor, notebook in hand, and begins to reread the dreams she left behind. Some seem too far away, others, almost childish, but many of them still make sense. More than that, many still awaken something within her. She realizes that she spent so many years living for her marriage, her family, the expectations of others, that she forgot to live for herself. And now, with the ending her husband chose, a selfish, cold, and silent one, she is reborn with the chance to choose her own beginning. She gets up, picks up trash, bags, boxes, not to throw everything away, but to reorganize her life. Open the cupboards, take things away from him, fold clothes, rearrange the books. Tinkering with the house is, in a way, tinkering with oneself, each object placed in a new location is a part of it that is also repositioned. That same day, she decides to do something simple but extremely symbolic. She moves the bed, pull the furniture away from the wall where it has always been, change the position of the pillows, update the headboard lighting. It's as if she were saying to herself, "This is where my life begins." When she finishes, she's tired, sweaty, but with a feeling of lightness she hasn't felt in a long time. It's as if, for the first time in years, the body and heart are in perfect harmony, tired but alive. She takes a long bath, letting the water run down her body, as if washing away the pain of the last few hours. She puts on comfortable clothes, makes some tea, and sits on the balcony, gazing at the late afternoon sky. The world seems big again, and she notices something unexpected. He is not afraid of being alone. She is curious about herself, about what exists beyond the marriage that ended, and then, as if needing to put into words what is, being born inside her, she says in a low voice, almost a whisper, but firmly, his freedom was escape. Mine is rebirth. And this phrase, simple yet powerful, becomes a landmark. She understands that her husband didn't leave because he was strong. He left because he was a coward, because running away is easy, because quitting is easy, because leaving emotional responsibility to someone else is the most comfortable gesture for those who have become accustomed to having everything handed to them. But she's not running away. She is finding herself. She is relearning how to exist. She is discovering that there is a version of herself that has been dormant for years, and that is now awakening as if breathing fresh air after a long time underground. She begins to mentally list things she wants to do: the course that was postponed, a visit to a friend she hadn't seen in years, the trip you've always dreamed of, the job you might still want to try for, the project that one day he started and left unfinished. None of this needs to happen tomorrow, not even next week. There's no rush, but now there is a possibility. There is life. She knows there will still be difficult days ahead, days of tears, painful memories, paperwork to sort out, unavoidable conversations. But she also knows that, for the first time, she is not walking toward the end. She is walking toward the beginning, and this beginning is hers, entirely hers. When the sun finally disappears below the horizon, she feels something deeper than comfort, feel a sense of belonging. It belongs to life itself again, and that feeling alone is worth all the suffering. The days that followed that devastating revelation were not easy. There were times when she could barely get out of bed, times when the silence of the house seemed to scream louder than any music, times when everything seemed too big, too heavy, too unfair. But there were also small moments, discreet, almost invisible, when she felt a thread of strength growing inside her. It was during those moments that she began to understand something profound. The truth hurts. The truth hurts. The truth will bring you down, but the truth sets you free. Now, looking back, she realizes that life wasn't trying to destroy her at that party. Life was finally lifting the veil from her eyes. He was brutally pushing her out of a story she had been carrying alone for a long time. She just didn't know it. She comes to understand that some endings are not losses. These are disguised liberations. These are doors that close because we insist on remaining in corridors where there was no longer any light. And when she thinks of her husband, of the cold words in the letter, of the secret meetings, of the strange looks from the guests, she no longer feels the same weight. The pain is no longer so sharp. Yes, it still exists. But now it's a pain that is healing. It's a pain that taught me something. It's a pain that has transformed. As the days go by, your routine changes. She goes back to cooking what she likes, without worrying about whether he would approve. She rearranges the house, donates clothes, and opens up spaces that had previously been swallowed up by decades of compromises. She takes short walks at dawn, just to watch the sunrise, something she always wanted to do, but never found the time for. Now she finds it, because time, she realizes, was always there. She just lacked the courage to use it for herself. She makes plans to meet up with friends she hasn't seen in years, and in each conversation she discovers a piece of herself that had been left behind. She revisits old dreams, forgotten doodles, abandoned hobbies, and gradually he begins to discover an unexpected truth. She still has a desire to live. She still has a hunger for the world. She is still curious about the future. And most importantly, she still has love. Not for him, not for the marriage, but for herself. When she looks in the mirror now, she doesn't see the same woman who left that party. That woman was broken, betrayed, silenced by years of sacrifices. The woman she sees today still carries scars, but scars are not a sign of weakness. They are a mark of survival. She smiles to herself. Something rare, something new. And think, what begins with pain can end in strength. That's not a pretty phrase to put in a frame. It's a truth experienced firsthand. She learned that respect is not begged for. It is demanded. Self-worth is not negotiable. It is recognized. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's acting even when you're afraid. And that starting over is not shameful. It's a victory. She also learned something even more difficult, that his freedom was never about courage. It was an escape. It was cowardly. It was a withdrawal. Her freedom, on the contrary, has nothing to do with escapism. She's not running from anything. She is running towards herself. And it is in this contrast that she understands the phrase that will accompany her for the rest of her life. His freedom was escape. Mine is rebirth. Rebirth requires strength. It requires wounds. It requires tough choices. But above all, it demands truth. And now she has them all. Today, when he wakes up, he no longer feels the same anguish. It feels like a purpose. Feel the direction. Feel the lightness. She knows she will still have difficult days ahead. It's inevitable. But now, when the pain returns, she doesn't shrink away. She grows. Because now she knows the strength she had and didn't even realize. Now he knows the woman he always was, but who remained hidden behind years of sacrifice. And when someone asks how she's coping with all of this, she answers with a sincerity she's proud of. I'm learning to live again. And, for the first time, I'm living for myself. Her story doesn't end with the separation. Her story begins with her. Entire, honest book. And that is the message she leaves. Not just for herself, but for anyone who listens to her. You always deserve more than someone who doesn't see your worth. At the end of the story, as she gazes at the open horizon, symbolic, possible, unknown, but ultimately hers, she makes a silent yet powerful invitation to the audience. What would you allow to be taken from you before realizing you deserve more? If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to the channel. And tell me in the comments, what was the moment in your life when you realized you deserved more than you were getting?